There's a house on East Delmar Street in Springfield, Missouri. It's an ordinary house, single-story, modest, on a quiet residential street in a mid-sized city in the Ozark Hills of southwest Missouri. The kind of street where people know their neighbours a little and mow their lawns on Saturdays and don't lock the door every time they step inside. In 1992, it was the home of a woman named Sherrill Levitt and her 19-year-old daughter, Suzie. On the morning of the 7th of June, 1992, that house was found empty. Not ransacked, not broken into, not bloodied, empty in the strangest possible way. Because everything was still there, except the people. 3 cars sat in the driveway, 3 purses sat together on a bedroom floor, one of them holding nearly $900 in cash. There were cigarettes on the side, an unfinished can of Coke, clothes folded neatly from the night before. Makeup, recently used as if somebody had been wiping it off before bed. A television still murmuring in one of the bedrooms, a bed that looked slept in, and a small frightened Yorkshire Terrier named Cinnamon moving around the house, agitated with no one to settle her. What wasn't there was Sherrill Levitt, or her daughter, Suzie Streeter, or Susie's best friend, Stacy McCall, who'd come back to the house with her in the small hours to sleep. 3 women had been in that house when the night began. By the time the sun came up, all 3 were gone, and 34 years later, not one confirmed trace of any of them has ever been found. To understand how strange the empty house is, you have to start with how ordinary the night was. The 6th of June, 1992 was graduation day. Suzie Streeter and Stacy McCall, both of them bright, popular, at the very front edge of their adult lives, graduated from Kickapoo High School that afternoon in a ceremony at 4 o'clock at the Hammond Student Center. Susie's mother, Sherrill, was there to watch. Suzie was 19, Stacy was 18. It was, by every account, one of the happiest days either girl had had. And they did what teenagers do on graduation night. They went out to celebrate. They moved between parties across Springfield through the evening. The loose plan had been to drive down to Branson, the resort town, the next day and to sleep that night at their friend Janelle Kirby's house. Around 10 o'clock, Stacy called her mother, Janice, to say the plan had shifted a little. They weren't going to Branson after all. It was the ordinary check-in of a teenager on a big night. Nothing in it was wrong. At home, meanwhile, Sherrill Levitt was having an ordinary night of her own. At about 11:15, she was on the phone to a friend, talking about a piece of furniture, an armoire she was planning to paint and varnish. She was a cosmetologist, a practical woman, house-proud. She talked about the armoire the way you talk about a small weekend project. That phone call is the last time anyone is known to have spoken to Sherrill Levitt. She sounded completely, entirely normal. Around 10 to 2 in the morning, the last party the girls were at, this one at the home of a friend named Michelle Elder, got loud enough that the police came and broke it up. And here the girls made the small, ordinary decision that the whole case turns on. They were exhausted, they'd been up all night, on the biggest night of their year. Janelle Kirby's house, where they'd meant to stay, was crowded, and Susie's house, her mother's house on East Delmar, was closer. So instead of going to Janelle's, Suzie and Stacy decided to just go back to Susie's place and sleep there and sort out the day in the morning. Sometime around 2 or 1:15, they drove to the house on East Delmar Street. That is the last time anyone can place Suzie Streeter or Stacy McCall anywhere on this earth. Because whatever happened next happened inside that house or just outside its front door, in the few dark hours between 2 in the morning and dawn, and there was no one left to describe it. The next morning, the group of friends still had those loose plans for the day. So Janelle Kirby, the friend whose house they'd originally meant to sleep at, came by East Delmar with her boyfriend, Mike Henson, to find the girls. They found the front door unlocked. They found all 3 cars in the driveway, Sherrill's, Susie's and Stacy's. And on the front porch they found the light broken. The glass globe that covered the porch light had been shattered and the pieces were lying on the ground. Oddly, the bulb inside it was still intact, just the outer glass shade smashed. Now Janelle Kirby was barefoot, and Mike Henson, seeing broken glass scattered on the porch where people were walking, did the natural, decent, helpful thing. He swept it up. He had no way of knowing that the shattered globe might have been the single most important piece of physical evidence in what was about to become one of the most famous missing persons cases in American history. Nobody knew that yet. It was just broken glass on a porch, and someone was barefoot, so he cleared it away. That is the first of the 2 accidents. They went inside, the house was quiet, the dog was upset, nothing looked violently wrong, nothing was smashed, nothing was overturned, there was no blood. But the girls weren't there, and neither was Sherrill, and their cars were all in the drive, and their things were all still in the house. Through the morning, more people came. Word spread among the friend group that something was off. Janice McCall, Stacy's mother, came to the house. And it was Janice who walked into the bedroom and saw the 3 purses sitting together on the floor. 3 grown women's purses with the keys and the money and the cigarettes still in them left behind. That's the moment it stopped being strange and started being frightening. Because a woman might leave her house without her car. She would not leave without her purse. 3 of them would not. Janice called the police, but by the time the police arrived and secured the house as a crime scene, the damage was done. And this is the second accident, and the larger one. Between the girls' friends and the 2 families, an estimated 10 to 20 people had already been through the house that morning. And some of them, trying to help, trying to be useful in a situation nobody understood yet, had tidied up. They'd emptied ashtrays, they'd washed coffee cups, they'd straightened the place. A crime scene is a piece of evidence. Every cigarette end, every glass, every object in its place is information. And before anyone understood that a crime had happened at all, a well-meaning crowd had cleaned much of that information away. And then there was the answering machine. At some point that morning, Janice McCall listened to the messages on Sherrill's answering machine, and there was one on there that struck her as strange. Strange enough that she remembered it, strange enough that it stood out. But in the chaos and the fear of that morning, with people coming and going and no one yet in control of the scene, the message was accidentally erased, recorded over, lost. Nobody today knows what that message said. It might have been nothing. A wrong number, a friend, an ordinary call. Or it might have been the voice that explained everything. We will never know, because it's gone, wiped out in the same confused morning that swept up the glass. 2 accidents, a shattered light and a recorded voice. The 2 things most likely to have carried the answer, both destroyed by decent frightened people before anyone knew there was a question. What was left, once the police finally took control, was a scene that told them almost nothing and everything at once. The women had not planned to leave. That much the house made clear. Stacy's clothes from the party were folded, makeup had been taken off, a soda was half drunk, a television was still on, Sherrill's bed looked slept in. Every sign inside that house said 3 tired people had been settling in for the night, getting ready for bed, winding down, doing the small last things you do before you sleep. And then, at some point in that, all 3 of them went out the front door and never came back, leaving everything they owned behind them. There was no forced entry. There was no struggle inside. Whatever drew them out, or forced them out, did it quietly, and did it at the threshold, because inside the house, nothing fought back. In the years since, the police have chased more than 5,000 tips. They've searched rural Missouri, they've worked with the FBI, and several names have come and gone as suspects. There was Robert Craig Cox, a convicted kidnapper who years later from a Texas prison cell claimed he knew the 3 women had been murdered and that their bodies would never be found. He'd been in Springfield that June. His alibi leaned partly on a girlfriend who later took it back. The police never believed him enough to charge him and never quite disbelieved him enough to close the door. There were others. A former boyfriend of Susie's tied to a break-in she might have been called to testify about. A local man already convicted of a separate killing. A travelling suspected serial killer whose route through the Midwest brought him near Springfield that very weekend. Each was looked at. None was charged. None could be tied by any piece of physical evidence to the empty house on East Delmar because there was almost no physical evidence left to tie anyone to. So the theories, in the end, come down to 3 shapes and none of them can be proven. The first is a stranger. Someone came to the door in the dark, a knock, a story, a fake emergency, and took all 3 women quietly out the front, leaving everything. It fits the calm scene. It struggles with the sheer difficulty of controlling 3 people at once and leaving no trace at all. The second is someone they knew. That one of the 3, most often in the theories Suzie, was the real target over something in her own life, and the other 2 were simply there. It fits the unlocked door and the absence of a fight. It struggles with the fact that no such person has ever been physically connected to the disappearance. And the third is the hardest one. That there was never anything supernatural or unsolvable about the mechanism at all. that it was one offender and one terrible hour, and that the only reason we don't know the answer is that the answer was swept up off a porch and taped over on an answering machine before anyone understood a crime had happened. That the Springfield Three isn't an impossible case. It's a solvable case whose solution was thrown away by accident by people who loved the women and were only trying to help. The house on East Delmar Street is still there. Sherrill Levitt and Suzie Streeter were declared legally dead in 1997, though all 3 files remain officially open, filed as missing. No remains have ever been found. No confirmed sighting has ever held up. Cinnamon, the little dog, was the only one in that house who came through the night, and she couldn't tell anyone what she'd seen. Stacy McCall's mother, Janice, has spent the rest of her life as one of the voices of the case. Years into it, she said something that holds the whole thing in a sentence. "Never in my wildest imagination," she said, "did I ever think that it would be 25 years later, and I would be saying, Stacy is still missing. It's more than 30 years now. Was it a stranger at the door in the dark? Was it someone one of them knew and trusted enough to step outside for? Or was it something ordinary and terrible that we could have solved? If the glass hadn't been swept up, if the message hadn't been erased, if the first people through that house had known that the quiet, tidy, everyday rooms in front of them were the last thing the 3 women ever left behind. 3 cars in the driveway, 3 purses on the floor, $900 nobody took, and a porch swept clean before anyone knew to look.